All right, welcome everybody. Want to welcome everybody that's joining us today for this special webinar with Joel Block. Before I introduce Dr. Tony Alessandra, I just want to take care of a couple quick house cleaning items. Anybody today that has a question, please use the Q&A down below in the bottom bar of Zoom. That way, Amy and myself can go through all the questions and we'll answer those at the end of today's webinar. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Tony Alessandra.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it, Jared. And I have to tell you, we are honored today, and I'm excited to introduce Joel Block. Joel is a personal friend, a fellow professional speaker, and a member with me of the National Speakers Association $1 Million Speaker Group. Now, as a money business insider, Joel's a long-time venture capitalist and hedge fund manager, which is sort of gobbledygook for a professional investor who lives in a Shark Tank world like on TV. Since selling his publishing company to a Fortune 500, Joel keynotes conferences worldwide, sharing Wall Street insights that enhance stakeholder value by delivering growth strategies and the inside track on how to disrupt your competitors' future to business executives and their teams. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Joel. Take it away.
Thanks, Tony. You know, listen, I don't want to waste any time going into any details about myself or much niceties about all what's going on here. We are in a state of emergency here in the United States. And this discussion is not about the healthcare emergency. This is about the financial emergency that many of us are dealing with individually and for our families. And our objective here is to help you to navigate exactly what you need to do to protect your family and to protect your business so that when this thing is done and we get on the other side of it, you can come back into action and you can still be going. So I'm just going to charge through a lot of material. There aren't going to be any slides. I'm just going to talk through a bunch of material. But at the end, there'll be some slides for you to review. So if you watch this video over again, you can look at some slides. You can kind of see what I was talking about. There will be a link or two to a couple of places that you might want to get some references. And there also are some reference materials that I have included as part of this discussion. Now, first thing you need to understand is that on the other side of this, there are going to be some winners and there are going to be some losers. Not everyone is going to come out unscathed. And our objective is for you not to be one of those losers. We want you to make sure that you come out on the other side successful. And there are specific things that you need to do in order to make that happen. And that's what this entire program that we're going to do for the next 30, 35 minutes, and then we'll take Q&A afterward. That's what it's about. So what's going to happen is that some companies are going to make mistakes and they're going to fall apart. And they're going to lose their clients and they're going to lose other things. And then the companies that are more successful are going to come along and take those clients and they're going to buy the assets of the other companies that didn't succeed. And they're going to buy them at pennies on the dollar. And that's just the way that the scavenger world works. And I've lived in that world for a long time. And that's what we want to try to avoid. So you have to be willing to do what it takes. And some of the things that it's going to take is outside of what you normally do every single day. There may be things that you have to do that are not inside of the typical daily routine that you have. They may be outside the personality that you have, but let me tell you, if you do not do these things, you'll find yourself in a world of hurt. So you have to take charge. You have to play offense, not defense. This is not a time to sit around, wait, dance, joke, make fun, play around. This is a time to be very focused and do the things that you have to do. And we're going to talk a little bit about taking the inside track. As somebody who's been in the Wall Street business for a long time, I have the inside track on a few things. And to me, the inside track is the best, smartest, and fastest ways to get things done. And I'm just going to tell you that the best, smartest, and fastest thing for you to do is to listen to somebody who's been down this path hundreds and hundreds of times, if not 1,000 or more, rather than making this up as you go along. That's going to save you an awful lot of time, energy, and resources. So step one, what is a business? A business is a machine that generates money. It's very simple, in my opinion. You know, you have on the front end, you might have somebody does some marketing, somebody does some selling, somebody does some manufacturing, somebody does some accounting, somebody does some collection. You have all these different things that are happening. And if you're a one-person business, that's okay. Then you're just the one that's doing the many different jobs. But it's a machine. There's a certain process. There's a certain rhythm. And on the back end, when all those steps are complete, then you've got yourself some money that comes out the other end. You've taken a long time, much of your career, building the machine that you have in place. What you do not want to do is dismantle the machine too soon. You don't want to start letting people go. You don't want to start laying people off. You don't want to start pushing things away that you've spent a long time building. And by the way, the government is well aware that you've spent a long time building your machine. They also don't want you to dismantle the machine, because when they turn the light switch back on and they tell us all that we can go back outside, they don't want you to have to take an inordinate amount of time putting your machine back together. They want you to go back into action just as fast as possible. So if you have any employees, they don't want you to release those people, especially if they're highly trained and well-trained people. They want you to be able to keep those people on some kind of a furlough or some kind of a minimal pay or some program that works, and they're willing to help to subsidize that because it's in the interest of the economy and everyone else. They either are going to subsidize your business, which you then pass the money through to the employees, or they're going to give the money directly to the employees in the form of unemployment. Either way, they don't get to keep the money. So it's in their interest to help pass that money through to keep every family in the United States up and running, and that's what we have to do. So I want you to be rational. I want you to be smart. I want you to be thoughtful. I don't want you to be whimsical. I want you to think through these decisions, and I don't want you to dismantle the machine unless it is absolutely necessary. I don't want anything to fall apart in your world, and that's really what the nature of most of these comments are. Understand that in good times, people think very highly of themselves. They don't need business advisors. They don't need brokers. They don't need brokers for houses. People sell their house by owner. They don't need brokers to get mortgages. They walk in the bank and they just get a loan. And they may not need coaches either, by the way, just like you guys. They may not need that because they feel like, hey, listen, I'm doing great. Look at the economy's treating me well. What do we need you for? We've just come through a period of really, really good times. And that's been terrific. But we now are going into a period of really tough times. And tough times, people are looking for help. They're looking for much more help now than they were looking for it before. So on the other side of this whole problem, I mean, we may be in a really serious emergency now, but understand that 6 months from now, and let's just say that 6 months is the magic number that it takes to kind of work our way through some of these problems. And we have to pick an arbitrary number just to kind of get to the other side. So I picked 6. So let's say it's 6 months. On the other side of 6 months, people are going to be scratching around begging for help because they want their businesses to come back to where they were. And so they're going to be looking to you for all kinds of advice and coaching and different kinds of support. So the opportunity is going to be terrific for you. And you just have to be there, standing ready to go when the opportunity presents itself in some period of time. And that's what this whole deal is about. Because in bad times, people need a lot of support. And we're about to go into a period where people are going to need a lot of support. And keep in mind, with $2.2 trillion, and I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, there's going to be a lot more pouring into the economy. That's a lot of money that people are going to need help spending. They're going to need help reorganizing and doing all kinds of things that they were not able to do before. So take advantage of that urgency and just be ready. The country right now is dealing with 4 different crises. 4 things are happening really at the same time. Number 1, we have a medical problem. We aren't medical people, or at least I'm certainly not a medical person. Nothing I can do about that. The second problem is we have a personal, financial, economic crisis. All of us, every company in America, every person in America is dealing with this at some level. People who think they're immune are finding that as time goes on, they're affected. Every one of us is affected. That's the part that we're focusing on in this call right this minute, is dealing with the emergency financial crisis that we're dealing with. The third crisis is when the government issues $2.2 trillion in financial aid of any kind, which, by the way, is more money that they authorized in a period of 7 days than the accumulated debt of the United States of America in the first 200 years. When they do that, That creates a debt crisis. We already have a debt crisis, and this is making our crisis worse. But that's not on the table right now. That's something that we're going to address in the future once we get through the first two problems that I just mentioned. And the fourth crisis, which isn't really getting a lot of play, is a mental health crisis. I'm very concerned that as a country, we're going to have all kinds of mental health problems, suicides, depression. We're all dealing with cabin fever and all kinds of other cooped up problems. We're all going crazy. There's a lot of domestic violence and other kinds of issues. These things are going to come out in a big way, and I'm concerned that we're not prepared for this, but that's a fourth crisis that I see us needing to address. The big silver lining, like I've already said, is that on the other side of this, an enormous infusion of cash, the largest infusion in the history of the world, is going to come out and be available to companies and other kinds of institutions and individual people, and they're going to need our help to put that to work. So let's just make sure that we survive this emergency so that we can live to fight another day and get on the other side. And once that happens, then we'll be in a position to help companies, and it will work out very well. Service providers of all kinds are going to be very valuable and very necessary. Let me just start by saying that I am not an attorney. I'm not a financial advisor. I am a CPA, but I'm not your CPA, so I can't give you any specific advice per se. I'm not giving advice. I'm just giving you insights and information. And if you need specific advice for your particular situation, you're going to need to go to your own accountant, attorney, or financial advisor to get that advice. So as long as we're clear about that, I'm going to share some ideas with you that I think will be helpful. Let's talk about some basic economics. The way that the economy works is that money has to move. When money moves, it's called velocity. There's velocity about money. So I give some to you. So in other words, somebody hires you, you take that money, you go buy groceries, the grocery store takes that money, they hire employees, they buy groceries from different suppliers. Those companies all get the money, they distribute it to their people, and their people get money, and then they take it and go to restaurants. Money moves to the economy. As money moves to the economy, that's a very healthy situation. What has happened in the last 30 days is that our economy has stopped in its tracks. It's completely frozen and money has stopped moving. And that explains why we have all these problems. Now, what's really problematic is that not all the money has stopped moving. So a lot of money, like a lot of our income, has stopped, but we still have certain outflows that we have to be responsible for. Mortgages are still due unless there's some arrangement, and credit cards are still due unless you make some arrangement, and car payments and leases and contracts and taxes and all kinds of other things are still due. So when some money is moving and other money is not moving, in other words, when we have a disconnect between the money that comes in and the money that goes out, that's when you have bankruptcies. Now, if one guy goes bankrupt, that's kind of a bummer. You know, it's too bad that happened, but that's how it is. But the government cannot allow everyone to go bankrupt at the same time, especially over the same reason that, you know, we had this stoppage. So the government may have to step in and do even more than they're doing now to slow some of these things down, because it's, I think what they've done so far is probably not enough, and they're going to have to do some more. But we'll see exactly what happens. The concept here is that still money goes stale. We have still money and it's stale, and we're really dealing with some problems because we don't have velocity. So that's what we have to do. When the music stops, like it did just now, and there's the inflows don't match the outflows, that's when we get those bankruptcies and problems. So we have to make sure that we match in and out. And the strategies that we're going to talk about right now are trying to find ways to match in with out. All right. So what should we do? Step one, we have to triage the patient. The patient is your family and it's your business. That when we talk about that, that's what we're talking about. So if you were to hurt yourself and you go to the emergency room, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to stop the bleeding. The single most important thing that they have to do is stop the bleeding and stabilize the patient. That's what we have to do for our businesses and for ourselves, is stop the bleeding, stop the outflow of cash, so that we try to match our in and our out so we don't burn up all of our resources. If we can't do that exactly, then there's a few things that we have to do to kind of mitigate whatever has to go out. Step two, the government is addressing on a daily basis different solutions that they can provide to help to mitigate the damage that this situation has caused. That's going to be part two of our discussion. And part three, which is the part that I speak about regularly, but we're not going to really have time to talk about it here today, is really preparing to thrive. When we get on the other side of this discussion, how do you disrupt your competitor's future? How do you go to the next level with your business? How do you grow and take advantage of opportunities that exist? We may touch on that, very, very briefly, but for the most part, this is really about how to make the patient stop bleeding and how to position yourself to get some of that government money that everybody's talking about. Okay, part one, surviving the emergency. This is the place where I want you to take out a pencil and start writing a couple of things down. And these ideas will be in the slides that you receive when we're done here. Okay, so number one, this is called crisis management. Crisis management is a science. We're not making this up as we go along. This isn't something that I just thought up this morning before this program. This is something I've been through many, many times. So we're going to execute crisis management 101 with you right now. Okay. I also want to make sure that nobody feels embarrassed that they're in this situation. It's not your fault that you're in this situation. Everybody in the country is in the same exact situation. And you just have to recognize that this is where we are. And you owe your best effort to get yourself out of this situation to yourself, your friends, your neighbors, your family, your spouse, really your vendors, everybody in your community. You have to do your part to get yourself out of the hole. Everybody's in the hole. Everybody's got to work hard together. And by the way, give other people, even your competitors, a leg up and help them out of the hole. We can all compete in the future. But right now, we have to save our economy. We have to save our businesses. We have to save ourselves. And we have to save each other. And that's really what the trick is. So for the goal of this Crisis Management 101, 6 months. The goal is going to be survive for 6 months. We have to get our business, we have to get our personal situation organized, we have to get our community situation organized to last for 6 months. That's it, okay? It may be less, maybe slightly more, but let's put a number, 6 months as a target. I think that hopefully it'll be less, but you got to remember that even if the government were to turn the switch on today and say, okay, the lockup's over and we can leave our houses and everything's back to normal, it doesn't go back to normal right away because companies, for example, that buy groceries, they're going to go to their supplier. The supplier hasn't been manufacturing a lot of materials. Those materials cause them to lean down their inventory. So they don't have any inventory left necessarily to sell. So they're going to have to ramp up their supplies. So they're going to take a couple of weeks to ramp up their supplies. When they go to their suppliers to get the materials that they need to make whatever it is they make, those suppliers might be out of inventory. So we could really be seeing some shortages for a long time into the future as companies ramp back up, getting themselves ready to pull the trigger and make the economy start again. So for every month that we're down, I estimate it's going to take another 2 to 4 weeks to get us back up and running. It's just kind of, you don't go from 0 to 60 in 1 second. You got to ramp your way up there. And that's the same thing with our economy. So that's why we don't want to dismantle the machine, is even if the machine stays perfectly intact, it's going to take some time to ramp back up. And if the machine has been dismantled in any way, it will take even longer to find replacement employees, to train them, to get organized. And this is the kind of message that not only is good for you, this message needs to be taken to your clients and other places so that they all understand the same thing, that when they turn the lights back on and we're ready to go, that we need to make sure that we're organized. All right, so here's step one. You got to know the truth about your situation. And you don't have to talk about it publicly, but you personally need to know the truth. So take out a pad and start writing down all of your fixed, which are your mandatory expenses. So fixed expenses are things like rents, leases, insurance, payroll, utilities, the debt that you have on any installment payments, your mortgage, contracts, taxes, anything that is required for you to pay, mark those things down. Now, once they're marked down, what's the solution? The strategy that we're going to use is we're going to try either to renegotiate, we're going to restructure, we're going to defer, or we're going to forbear. And those are all fancy words for we're going to try to get out of paying those things right now. Now, you call your mortgage company and you say, listen, I can't make the mortgage payment this month because my income is significantly down. You're not the first person to call them. They're all going to understand that. They've all gotten that call 1,000 times just today already. And you're going to tell them that. Now, I don't know what their answer is going to be. They're going to definitely say you can have a period of time that you don't have to pay. I don't know if they're going to say we're going to take that 3 months and put it on the back end of the mortgage, or if they're going to say, we're going to take the 3 months that you don't pay and we're going to spread it across the next 12 months or so. That part is not clear. Those details have not all been addressed. But right now they're just saying, listen, let's postpone some of your payments and we'll deal with how we deal with it somewhat later. And again, this is a very fluid situation. It's changing every day. Every bank is making their own policies. Every organization is making their own policies. I know that Ford is doing things for their cars, and they've got promotions. I see them on TV that they'll let you do deferrals and they'll make a few payments for you. So every company is dealing with this in a different way, and you have to go find out what it is that is going to work for you. So renegotiate, restructure, defer, and forbear. And how do you do this? The way you implement this is you're going to have to go to the websites of every one of these mandatory fixed payments that you have. So you write them down and you go on the websites of these companies and you look and you see, what are they doing? So Chase may say one thing, Wells Fargo may say something else, Ford may say one thing, Acura may say something else. You have to figure out what it is for each thing. And that's why I said earlier, it may not be your personality to get on the phone with these companies, but you got to do it. You have to do it because otherwise you're going to be in a world of hurt. You don't want to have to make payments and have outflow of cash that doesn't match your inflow if you could help it. Really important principle that you want to make sure. Step number 2, you have to know your truth about your variable expenses. Now, what is a variable expense? A variable expense or a discretionary expense is something that changes, so you're not locked into it. So that could be things, for example, advertising, promotion, entertainment, subscriptions that you have, recreation and fun. I'm not telling you not to do these things, but I'm telling you, you have to write them down. You have to know exactly what's coming in, exactly what's going out, and you have to manage these things with an iron fist. So what's the strategy? It's not all the same as before. On this one, first thing you have to do is you have to contemplate. Do I want to have these expenses any longer? Well, maybe your family needs the Netflix subscription. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it needs the cable subscription. Maybe it doesn't. You have to decide. Every family makes its own decisions, and your business has to make the same decisions. We all have subscriptions. You might have to call those companies. So once you've contemplated that you want it, you may want to eliminate it, renegotiate it, or put it on pause. You may have to call the company and say, listen, we're going to be putting this thing on pause. Now, this company may be getting hundreds of thousands of calls too and requests for pause. They don't want to lose all these customers. They don't want you to cancel your service any more than you want people to cancel on you. So what they might say is, tell you what, we'll continue to give you the service, but don't pay anything for the next 3 months. And in the 4th month, we'll just turn the thing back on. That's a real thing that they might do. It's happening all over the place. You have to be aggressive in figuring out exactly what to do. So again, like the other step, you're going to have to go to the websites, you're going to have to research, and then you're going to have to call or reach out in whatever way they want you to reach out. And that's just what has to happen during this difficult time. Step number 3, know what emergency resources you have available to you. So you're going to list on another piece of paper all your open credit cards. So you're going to list the balance, the available balance, and the interest rate of each of your cards. And you'll make a line for each one, and you'll figure out how much you have. And then if you have, let's say, for example, a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, or you have any other kind of line of credit, all your available resources, you want to notate what those are. You want to know in advance how much money you have and how long you're going to be able to last in this emergency situation. And the more you know, the better off you are. Knowledge is going to be power for you. So you're going to put this thing together. You're going to mark that down. Now, if you have to use any of these resources, you're going to want to use your lowest interest rate ones first. That's why you're going to research what the rates of the credit cards are and what you're doing. That's a really important thing to do. Finally, if you have any of these checks from your credit card companies to let you take any kind of a cash advance, 18 months for 0 interest or whatever the thing is, you might want to exercise those if you need to. Something to think about. Step number 4, you want to tap other kinds of assets that you have. For example, one of the best places, one of the places that people don't think about all the time is the cash value in any life insurance policy that you might have. So you have a little savings account that kind of builds itself up over time in your long time, your whole life insurance policies. You call the life insurance company and say, listen, would you please send me that money? And they'll let you borrow that money out of your own little mini savings account. You don't have to qualify. This is very fast money. It's really good. They recommend you pay it back, and maybe you do, maybe you don't. And again, this is not financial advice. I'm just giving you some ideas about things that you need to look into. Call your insurance provider and find out if that's something that you can do. If you don't presently have a HELOC, a home equity line of credit on your home, now would be a great time to get one. Unfortunately, you probably can't get it right this minute because the banks are just inundated issuing these different loans and everything on behalf of the government. Finally, you probably have stocks, or maybe you have a retirement funds, a 401k, an IRA. This really is your very last resort. I really hope that you don't have to resort to taking any of these kind of resources. And I'm going to tell you what I've told my family and what I say when I do media appearances, and I do a lot of media. I'm on TV a lot, and I really give a lot of this kind of advice, that the first most important thing to remember is there's going to be a bounce. The market is already bouncing back. It's doing better than it was 2 weeks ago. We've probably hit the bottom and way past the bottom, and we're on the way back up now. You don't want to miss that. So if you start pulling resources and assets out of the market now, you're going to miss the bounce. And that would really be a big problem. So don't do that if it's entirely possible for you not to. Step number 5 is you want to make sure you document your cash, the cash in versus the cash out. And you need to manage your cash in and your cash out with an iron fist. You may have a hard time collecting, but you certainly have control over money that leaves. So you may not be able to control exactly what comes in, but you certainly can control what goes out. And you have to handle that with as much power and strength as you possibly can. You want to delay and defer as many payments as much as possible so we can get ourselves into the long run. You want to try to match the in with the out. To the extent you can do that, you'll be successful, and you'll be able to last through this crisis longer and be more successful. I will only tell you, there are some payments that you have to make. If you have suppliers that you rely on, so for example, if you sell something and there's a supply that you need to sell that, if you're not just selling time, if you're selling something else, for example, a supermarket, if you're giving any of this kind of advice to any of your clients, if a restaurant is making food, they may have to go to a farm and buy the vegetables, let's say, for example. They have to keep that farm current, because if they don't keep the farm current, the farm will cut them off and then they won't be able to run their business. So there are going to be some expenses that are absolutely going to be necessary for you to run your company and run your business. And you want to be very much aware of those deals. Step number, or the last part of step number 5 is take advantage of the new grace periods that a lot of companies have implemented, mostly by state or some other kind of regulatory request. So for example, insurance companies have always given a 30-day grace period. A lot of time, in a lot of places, at least I know in California, they've mandated, the Department of Insurance mandated that all insurance policies now carry a 60-day minimum grace period. That's for life insurance, that's for liability insurance, all different kinds of things. You want to call your providers and you want to find out about this. Again, don't just stop paying these companies. You have to call and tell them that you need to make payment arrangements, because if you don't call them, who knows what could happen. There could be all kinds of problems that you don't want to have. You want to be aggressive, you want to be communicative, and you want to discuss these things with them. You're not going to be the first person to call. They're not going to be surprised by your call, put it like that. And finally, every one of your mortgages, your credit cards, they all have different grace periods. They all have different forbearance periods or different kinds of restructures that you can take advantage of. And you need to just get on the phone and you need to work through this with each and every one of them. The 6th out of the 7 points that I want to make here are, this is really kind of a bonus point. This is not part of Crisis Management 101, but for the coronavirus period of time that we're in right now, this is an important thing to remember. This is not a time to be selfish, to look inward. As much as you're probably hurting, as difficult as this is for you, it's equally hard on every other American, and every other person on this globe is at some place dealing with something related to this. I just heard this morning that the people in Wuhan, China, were cooped up for 76 days in a row. And that's a police state where they have different kinds of rules than we have here. Ours is more voluntary, and they don't arrest us. At a place like that, it's a different story. So other people in other parts of the world are dealing with this exact same thing that we are. Very difficult for them, just like it is for us. And we have to remember, our fellow citizens. So as you're thinking about yourself and the strategies you're going to use, pass these strategies and help these strategies to be employed by your employees, your colleagues, neighbors, family, friends, and even your competitors. We can compete when this 6-month period is over, or whatever period of time it is. But for the meantime, let's all get through this period of time and get to the other side, because it's going to be good for everybody in our country and in our world. Finally, step number 7 is once you've gotten the patient to stop bleeding, then you can go get some help. And the help is available from the federal government. There probably are some state grants and state resources available. I'm not aware of what the state resources are in every part of the country. So you'll have to do some research to see what kind of state resources are available. But I am going to share a couple of ideas for you federally. The federal programs are rolling out. In a week's time, the government allocated this $2.2 trillion. The implementation of that has been a little bit more difficult than they expected. It's not gone very easy for them, but they are working through that as we speak. So here's what we have. There's a $10,000 emergency grant that's available from the Small Business Administration. Now, I have to tell you that just last night, I heard that this program is oversubscribed. There was only $10 billion set aside for it. So for $10,000, that's 1 million companies. And there's a lot of us little companies. Every one of us is a little company. 1 million little companies were going to be able to get this money. Well, that got oversubscribed in just about 2 days. So they ran out of money. So what are they doing? Well, it sounds like what they're going to do is, instead of authorizing more, which I'm quite certain they are going to authorize more, but they don't have more right now, what they're probably going to do is they're probably going to reduce the amount that they pay each company. So instead of $10,000 per company, they're trying to figure out how many employees you have and give out a certain amount based on the number of employees. It doesn't sound like a very satisfactory solution to me, but that's what I'm hearing. The most important point that I'm making is that this is a highly fluid situation, changing by the hour. Everything that I tell you today could be different tomorrow. So, and if that happens, I apologize, but I'm going to do the best I can to give you the best information that's available right now, as best we know it. And the resources that we're circulating are as best as we know them currently. So the $10,000, you got to get your application in, whether or not they have any money left or not. There probably is going to be some money that's earmarked and spread out in a different way. And if not, if more money comes available, then maybe there'll be a second wave. The application takes about 5 minutes, and there's a link in the slide materials that I'm going to circulate later today with the link right straight to the exact page, because a lot of times in these government websites, there's hundreds of pages in their websites and it's buried somewhere. So it takes you to exactly the right page. And when we start the Q&A, I can probably even circulate the link so you have that immediately. You probably need to call your CPA to get some assistance with this. One of the things is that they're not taking the numbers on a calendar year. They're taking the numbers from February of 2019 to January of 2020. So when they talk about a year, they didn't pick the normal year, a calendar style year. They picked a slightly different year, and you may need some help calculating that with your CPA, or else your QuickBooks can run a report and it can help you. But your CPA may need to help you if you need some payroll questions answered on some other things. No doubt about it, more dollars are going to be required. And there's a lot of questions about implementation. And the biggest questions are being asked by the banks, because the banks are the ones who are advancing a lot of these loans. And then they want to make sure that they get their reimbursement from the federal government, so they have to do it a certain way. The banks don't exactly know what the right way is just at this exact moment, and for that reason, they want to be rather careful. So that's part of why this has taken a little longer than anticipated. But I will say for the government, they have acted pretty speedy so far. So the second program, so the first thing is they got this $10,000 grant. The next one is called PPP. That's the Payroll Protection Program. And basically what this is, it's a loan up to $10 million. And if you have a payroll, any amount that you borrow that gets used for payroll in the next 8 weeks, plus a couple other allowable expenses, will be forgiven from the amount of the loan that you take. So if you borrow $400,000 and $200,000 is used for payroll, including, by the way, payroll that you pay to yourself. And payroll means you issue a W-2. So if you have a single member LLC, that's not the same. If you're a Schedule C, that's not the same. Those people, they have not yet addressed. If you're a 1099 person where people pay you 1099s or you pay other people, they have not yet addressed that. They're telling us that on April the 10th, the guidance for what to do with those kind of organizations will be coming out in a couple of days. But the first bucket that they've dealt with are these W-2 people. So if you have a payroll, if you're an S Corp or a C Corp or something similar, you're probably going to issue a payroll. You're eligible to go get one of these PPP loans. And these PPP loans, you go to your regular bank. You don't do this online. You go to your bank and you submit the application. They may have an online form through your bank, but it's not being handled by the government. It's being handled by the bank. And the banks then get reimbursed by the government, which is why there's this big holdup. The banks are nervous that they don't have their ducks all in a row yet. They're not going to get their proper reimbursements. So they will not start releasing the money until they get a lot of their questions answered. And frankly, the questions just don't, the answers don't exist. There are more questions than there are answers because everybody's making this up as we go. This has never happened in human history before. No one's ever heard of anything like this. So bottom line is these are all deals that are for small businesses, companies under 500 employees. You can get up to $10 million on one of these PPP loans, and they'll forgive up to 8 weeks of payroll and some other expenses. No personal guarantee. It's a really good program. I hope that they can get it implemented. The second major program, and there are many different programs, but the two major ones that apply to us, and this might apply to more people who are on this call, is called EIDL. It's called Economic Injury Disaster Loan. And these are issued by the SBA. These are up to $2 million. They are personally guaranteed, although it's supposedly the first couple $100,000, if that's all you take, would not be require a personal guarantee. There is no forgiveness. It's a pure loan, but it has a long time, like a 30-year deal, and it's really good money. And especially for an emergency, if you need it, it could help you. So there's a couple of these programs. We'll answer some questions in our Q&A period because I want to wind this down and open up for Q&A. You access this through the SBA. It's for companies with under 500 employees, up to $2 million, but there is going to be a personal guarantee. So finally, on the other side of this deal, and we don't have time left for this as expected. We're going to talk about disrupting your competitors' future, how to be a superior company with great strategy, business model, structure, and all the other pieces and things that I talk about. But right this minute, the real objective is to talk about how to stop the bleeding and how to get some help from the government. And then we can talk about some of those big issues at some other point in time. So use this time that you have to grow your customer list, to learn some new skills. If you want to take advantage of my podcast, Profit from the Inside, strategies to give your business the inside track, my book, Stop Hustling Gigs and Start Building a Business. There's all kinds of resources that are available to you, and you'll see what some of those resources are when you get the slide deck. So listen, Jared, I want to turn it back to you. And, those are really my remarks. And if people have questions, I'd like to take them.